Now that we've learned some of the basics of dimensioning, let's try an example problem together. Here's our multi-view drawing that we're going to use to put the dimensions on. However, this drawing is pretty small, so it would be pretty difficult to put dimensions on this. So the first step is to increase the scale of my drawing. Remember, we're keeping the dimensions the same, but we're just increasing the size of the drawing itself. You'll also notice that at the top, there's a note that each block or each square on my graph paper represents ½ an inch. That's going to help me come up with the dimensions to include. Right now, I'd like you to pause the video so that you could sketch this at a scale of 3:1. In other words, one block on this diagram will be 3 blocks on your graph paper. Once you're done drawing that, you can unpause the video and we'll start adding dimensions to our drawing. Okay, now that we have our drawing set up to add dimensions to, let's go ahead and start adding some dimensions. Remember that we're going to add dimensions for the height, width, and depth of the original square that this object was made out of. We're going to add dimensions for this hole right here. And we're also going to add, or any other cutouts like you see here. And we're also going to add dimensions for the location of any features. Specifically, we'll need to add the dimensions for the location of this hole. In the first video, it talked about adding the dimensions for height, width, and depth first. However, I typically don't do that, because if I were to do that, then my largest dimension would be closest to my object, which is less than ideal. So instead, while I'm keeping in mind where I would put those height, width, and depth of dimensions, I'm going to start out with some smaller dimensions here. For example, I'm going to start out with dimensioning some of the features that we see on this front face right here. So for starters, I know that I'm going to need an extension line, and remember we leave a visible gap there. Your extension line should be thinner than your visible lines, remember. And I know one of the things I'm going to have to dimension is the location of this hole. Remember, for location of a hole, we dimension to the center line. And we do need to leave a space between the visible line and our dimension. This hole, at least the center line of this hole, is located 3 blocks from the bottom of our object. But on the original picture, it was only 1 block from the bottom of the object. Each block is ½ an inch, so I'm going to put that dimension of 0.5 on my drawing. Remember, closed in arrows, and because this space is as large as it is, I have the dimension in the middle with the arrows on either side of it. Another thing that I will need to dimension is the height of this portion right here. So I'm going to put another extension line here. And my dimension line would pass right about there. That is twice as tall, or 1 inch. Finally, I know that I need the height of this entire object here. So I'll put an extension line starting from the top all the way out. And that has a nice long dimension line. That is 2 inches tall, according to my original drawing. Remember that the size of the numbers that you choose should be approximately ½ of a block tall. Although you don't exactly need to have out a ruler to measure that for the purpose of this class. Now, one other feature that's not dimensioned on this view, but is important to notice, is this step right here. I'm going to put that dimension on this right-hand drawing rather than the left-hand drawing, because this right-hand drawing is the one that shows that it's a step, whereas on the right-hand drawing I just see it as a straight line. So I'm going to have an extension line come out here and put that measurement in here. Now, I did not leave myself enough room. I made that mistake as I was drawing this. And so my dimension here is too close to my object. Since this is just practice, we'll let it slide, but make sure as you are doing your drawings that no dimension ends up this close to your visible line. That should be 1.5. Okay, so looking at this hole again, there's two other measurements that I'm going to need to put on here. Two other dimensions I'm going to need to put. One of those dimensions is the other location of this hole. I've talked about how far up I go from the bottom, but I also need to talk about how far in I need to go. So that dimension is something that I'm going to put up at the top here. And again, we want to group our dimensions. So I'm going to think about anything else that I need to dimension on that face. One of those things I need to dimension is how long this portion is. On my original drawing, that was 4 blocks long, or 2.0. Now, from this line to this center line, I have a total distance of 0.5 inches. So again, I'm grouping those dimensions right here like we talked about in the video. One other dimension that's typically shown on this view is the length. Which in this case is 3.0. And again, remember, extension lines are allowed to cross each other like they do here. But if you need to have a dimension line crossing an extension line, you should leave a gap. In this case, these two did not actually have to cross. One other thing that's missing from this front view is the size of this hole. So remember, we want to have an arrow that points as if it would pass through the center of my circle, and then a line extending outward. And then I need my diameter symbol. The diameter of this is 1 block, or 0.5 inches. Okay. I believe I have all the dimensions I need for this front face, but I need to figure out if there's anything else I might be missing before I continue on. I'm going to look at the top face next. One thing I noticed that I have not yet dimensioned is how wide this is. This appears both on this top view as well on this right side view, but the top view one would be a lot easier to dimension than this right side view. So I'm going to add in that dimension here. Again, 1 block on the original drawing, so 0.5 inches. I add that in. Okay, so another measurement that we need is for the height of this feature here. So I'll add an extension line coming out that way and extend this extension line a bit. That being 3 blocks on my original drawing means that that's 1.5 inches tall. And finally, I need the depth of my whole object. And again, I'm going to put that in that preferred location, which is on the right-hand side of this top face. 4 blocks on the original object means that it's about 2 inches tall. One other measurement that I'm missing. The one other measurement I'm missing is for how long this top portion is. And you'll notice that I don't really have that anywhere. I just realized I did something incorrectly. This dimension line should extend all the way down there. Okay, as I was saying, I need to know how, what the dimension is of this portion right here, which is the same as this portion right here. But I can tell on this face exactly what that looks like, and it's a lot easier than telling on this face. So I'm going to put that dimension right over here. It's 1 inch in length. So add that there. To check to make sure that I have everything, I like to go through and look at all of my pieces of my object. So I know I have the height, the width, and the depth. These are the first three things I check. Then I go through each face and say, okay, do I have the size of each thing that I see? So starting over on the right here, I have the height of this feature, and do I have the length of this feature here? Well, not directly, but if I know that this portion is 2 and this whole thing is 3, I know this has to be 1. So that would be an unnecessary dimension if I added that into my diagram. I also notice there's a hole in here. I have the diameter of the hole, I have the location from this side and the location from this side, so I'm good there. Another feature I see in this is this square portion right here. I have the height of this square portion simply by the fact that it's the same height as this, and I have dimension to the height of that. But do I have this dimension here? Well, that appears up here, but I don't see a dimension on that side either, so I'm probably missing that dimension. Let's add it on this top face. Again, that number is a bit close to my drawing. I didn't quite leave myself enough space in between my drawings here. Okay, so I have the size of this. What about this cutout feature? Do I know how wide it is? Yes, that's that 2.0. Do I know how tall it is? Yes, that's on this diagram. That's that 1.5. Okay, going to my top view here, I have the width of that on this view. This portion I have the width of because it's over here, and I have the width of this whole portion right there, and the width of the whole thing over here. I know where this hole is located. That's already dimensioned down here. I also know how wide this portion is. That's right here. And then looking over on my right hand face, I have everything I need to know about this little cutout portion dimensioned on the other two drawings. I know about this step. I know how high this is because that's on this drawing right here. I know how tall this portion is because that's on this drawing right here. So, from what I can tell, I have everything dimensioned and I don't have any repeat dimensions. So I'm finished dimensioning my drawing.